Good evening, everyone. Finally getting around to the next step in this series of exposures of craziness going on around us. Sometimes this is hard to follow. I recommend that you go through these at least a few times and follow up with the links and what have you that we'll have at the end, because you need to understand these concepts. What we're looking at now is related to the IRS, but it's not as specific as the previous ones on what is income. That's the key. But there's so many other tangents that you have power to stand on that you need to understand. Citizenship and jurisdiction. Who are you? Are you a slave or are you a free person? Most people would say, well, yes, we're free. We're the freest country in the world. Well, we're not. Do the research and you're going to realize that there's a lot of other nations around that have more freedoms than we do. We are being strangled to death by jurisdiction, by statutes, and various and sundry other issues that are taking place. 60 million statutory laws. It goes on and on. So what we want to do is delve into trying to piece together what happened beginning a long time ago, but you'll begin to piece it together once we start going through some of this stuff. There's a quote by Goethe: "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." You know, if you honestly believe you're free, then you're pretty much just sitting in the boat and floating down the river. But if you don't understand how you've been sidetracked on that river, going down different tributaries into a dead end, then that's exactly where the enemy wants us to be. Now, let's ask a question. Who is the top authority in this union of states we call the United States of America? Who, if you asked 1,000 people and said, okay, who's the top authority? Most people would say it's the federal government. Everybody knows the federal government is the highest authority, and then you have the state governments, and then you have the local governments, county commissioners and what have you, and then we come down to the bottom dredges of mere mortals and peons that are at the bottom, which is basically the people, right? Yep, that's pretty much what people would say. Federal government is in charge. Why do we believe this? Because we have completely lost track of who we are. The presumption is that what I just stated, and the fact that if we don't understand our roots, we don't understand history, we don't understand original intent of where we began and where the federal government even came from, then we are doomed, absolutely doomed, to be enshackled and chained as slaves. There's no question about it. We've also forgotten what the federal, state, and local governments are. What are they? They are created entities. Created by whom? We, the people. That's a whole nother topic to go into the legalities and the lawfulness of state and local and federal governments and the people. So let's begin to put the pieces together on this topic, and like I said, these are just pieces. There is nothing in here that basically covers everything that we're trying to do. Now we need to start with the actual jurisdiction of the federal government. Constitutionally, what jurisdiction do they have and how far does it lawfully reach into our lives? Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution defines 18 enumerated powers of the federal government. Now, yes, this one states 18. There are others if you break away from that and look into such things as the Supreme Court and a few other powers, but there's less than 30. We're looking at very limited powers. So how many do you see the government exercising today over states and individuals? Where does the government not affect your life? Let's look at this. Exclusive jurisdiction. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. To exercise exclusive legislation, which is lawmaking, exclusive lawmaking in all cases whatsoever. It means just hands down. It's got total exclusive lawmaking capabilities over such district not exceeding 10 square miles. And district, does that sound familiar? Like in D.C. As may, by secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for everything under the sun, including your life, your children's life, your health, your education, and every other detail of your being. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's not what that says. Okay. What does it say? For the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Okay, so exclusive legislation over what? Areas that are ceded to the government by the states, which is by the people, for they need a fort, they need a Navy dockyard, they need, whatever it might be, for the actual function of the government to serve us. Where in that does the federal government receive authority to have jurisdiction over states themselves, or local communities, counties, cities, towns, or over you? Well, let's keep looking. Title 4, United States Code, Section 72. Public offices at seat of government. Public offices. All offices attached to the seat of government shall be exercised in the District of the United States, the District of the Continent of North America, no, the District of Columbia, the 10 square mile little box that government was granted, and not elsewhere except as otherwise expressly provided by law. Expressly provided means it has to be labeled, very clearly written down, documented, made the law. Okay, let's keep looking. This is the United States Supreme Court, 1894. The laws of Congress in respect to those matters, and we're getting right back to basically the issues of freedom and liberty and justice and all these things, do not extend, and it says, remember before, exclusive legislation in what? Limited areas. The laws of Congress in respect to those matters do not extend into the territorial limits of the states, but have force only in the what? District of Columbia and other places that are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government. Let's keep looking. The exclusive jurisdiction what the United States have in forts and dockyards ceded to them by the states is derived from the express assent of the states by whom the secessions are made. It could be derived in no other manner, because without it, the authority of the state would be supreme and exclusive. Supreme Court, Supreme Court. So why does the federal government claim jurisdiction in states and local communities and over all citizens? Presumption. Okay. More case. When Congress is operating in its exclusive jurisdiction over their territories, Congress is stating that it has jurisdiction over their territories, not the states, not all these other places, except in those enumerated powers. Exclusive jurisdiction over their territories or the federal zone, which is what their territories are. It's the federal zone. It is important to remember that the U.S. government has full authority to enact legislation as private acts pertaining to its boundaries, its Washington, D.C. little sandbox. And it is not a state of the Union of States because it exists solely by virtue of the compact or the Constitution that created it. The U.S. Constitution does not say that the District of Columbia must guarantee a Republican form of government in its own subject citizens within its territories. And these are the cases that discuss that. This wasn't a quote, but what it's stating is that the Constitution does not have an impact on the federal zones, on the federal government, and on the citizens in those districts, in those territories, in its own lands that were ceded to it. It can do whatever it wants. And anybody that works for the government in those territories is subject to, they may have to stand on their head for 10 minutes when they come into work. If that's what it is, that's what they have to do if they want the job. It's a privilege. And with privilege comes something that you have to give back to pay for that privilege. Okay, let's keep looking. Prior to the adoption of the federal Constitution, states, and this is a quote, possessed unlimited and unrestricted sovereignty and retained the same afterwards. Upon entering the Union, they retained all their original power and sovereignty except such as was surrendered to the federal government, or they were expressly prohibited from exercising by the United States Constitution. In other words, those enumerated powers, those few basic ones, are exclusive to the federal government. Anything else is the states and the peoples. So this begins our trek into their deceptive language and their presumptions and everything that we have presumed and accepted, chain after chain after chain, on our lives and our freedoms. Okay, 26. Let's look at the section 31, and it states state, United States, and citizen. Now we're talking about and 26 CFR is Code of Federal Regulations. These are definitions we're looking at. Okay. When used in the regulations in this subpart, the term state includes the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, the territories of Alaska and Hawaii before their admissions as states, and when used with respect to services performed after 1960, Guam and American Samoa. Okay, let's go to B. When used in the regulations in this subpart, the term United States, when used in a geographical sense, which everyone presumes is the entire continent, means the several states, including the territories of Alaska and Hawaii before their admission as states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. When used in the regulations in this subpart with respect to services performed after 1960, the term United States also includes Guam and American Samoa when the term is used in geographical sense. I know this gets tedious and technical, but you need to understand what these guys are trying to say and this wordsmithing. The term, and this is in this thing, in this quote, 26 CFR, the term citizen of the United States includes a citizen of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, and effective January 1st, 1961, a citizen of Guam or American Samoa. Now, everyone presumes that the word includes means everything under the sun plus what they're stating here. Everyone presumes that it means, of course, all the United States, the 50 states or however many states there were at the time, plus these new additions. Nope, it's not what it means. Let's keep looking at some quotes here. An individual is a non-resident alien if such individual is neither a citizen of the United States nor a resident of the United States. 26 U.S.C. Okay, when we hear of a non-resident alien, we think someone who is not an American and who doesn't live in the United States, right, but is living here. No, this is where the deception comes in. The states, in other words, the 50 states right now, are foreign to the United States. In other words, the United States, which is the federal government, and its territories are foreign to the 50 states. They're different entities completely. Anyone living in the corporate United States is in its jurisdiction. The corporate United States, back to the other quotes, was Guam, Samoa, Virgin Islands, the territories that belong to this corporate federal jurisdiction. Stay with me. Hang in there. Let's keep looking. You're going to be blown away by some of this stuff. Okay, United States Supreme Court. United States is a corporation, and that it existed before the Revolutionary War. The United States is not a land mass. It is a corporation. Are you starting to get it? There's a difference between the United States and the United Several States of the Union. They're two completely different entities. Okay, another Supreme Court case. No political dreamer was ever wild enough to think of breaking down the lines which separate the states and compounding them into one common mass. So what do most Americans believe? They believe that the United States is one common mass. It is a entity in and of itself. It is a nation, an independent single entity existing being, as it were. No, that is not exactly what was contemplated or what was intended. Now, let's get into another tangent of this, and this will all come together, believe me. The deceptive 14th Amendment and U.S. citizenship. The 14th Amendment. Keep in mind now the other hints before when we talk about jurisdiction and we talk about the difference between the United States and its territories and the people and the states and the Union. Big difference, huge difference, but we've forgotten it. Okay, let's first look at the 14th Amendment. Section 1, Clause 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Well, why in the world would that amendment have to be even created when everyone understood that they were already citizens within the Union? Oh, why indeed? Okay. Let's take another step. Clause 2. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. In other words, they were equating, again, I mean, that clause right there should pause us and say, well, wait a minute. Why would they even have to put this as an amendment, that protects people of all 50 states? Well, that's not why it was put in there. Clause 3. Nor shall any state deprive any person of liberty, life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Its jurisdiction. It's what? The entire continent of 50 states, or the jurisdiction of the federal government and the citizens that belong to it? Its jurisdiction. Keep that in mind. Now let's go over this again carefully and notice the deceptive language being used here. Section 1, Clause 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction, which begs the question, if you're within the United States, wouldn't you feel that you were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? Why would they have to put this in there? Okay, subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Well, this is all totally redundant, superfluous information that they're putting into an amendment. Why? Why are they doing this? Any person born or naturalized, again, born meaning you were actually born in that territory, or you were naturalized in the U.S. and subject to its jurisdiction. Notice the grab for jurisdiction over these persons naturalized in the United States. This is going to make more sense. Like I said, you may have to go through this 3 or 4 or 5 times to understand what they've done, but once you do, it empowers you because you understand who you are and what you are and what you are not, and what you are not subject to. This U.S. does not mean state citizens as well when it's talking about in the United States. Consider, if you are a citizen born in one of the several states, don't you presume you're within that U.S. jurisdiction? Why this language? Again, it quotes, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Well, duh. Most people would say, well, of course. Wouldn't you presume that someone who resides in a state and born in a state already be a citizen of the U.S. and under its jurisdiction? Yes, but that's not what they're talking about. So why do we have to state the obvious here? They're not stating the obvious. They're stating the very unobvious. 14th Amendment was not for citizens in any of the states existing in 1869. 14th Amendment was adopted on July 9th, 1868. And basically it wasn't for citizens outside of something else because they already had a citizenship and didn't need one. There was no need for the 14th Amendment to suddenly be created that suddenly gives citizenship to everybody in the 50 states, or the not the 50 then, but the several states. The question is, why did who needed a citizenship? Who needed a citizenship and why? Okay, we'll address that in just a second. Clause 3, we're going to skip 2. We don't need to comment on that. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process, and we're repeating here, but we're going into detail, without due process of law, or deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Again, it. What is it? The 50 states that they're trying to state is one entity, or are they talking about a different body that is the federal government? And we're going to get into federal citizenship versus state citizenship. Okay, notice within its jurisdiction, it being this United States entity. Now back to the question of who would need a citizenship and why, and what was the government up to in allegedly ratifying the 14th Amendment. And I say allegedly for reasons. Some more court cases, and this is at the time. The object of the 14th Amendment, as is well known, and this is United States Supreme Court, was to confer upon the colored race the right of citizenship. That was the purpose of the 14th Amendment. Okay, the first clause, another case, of the 14th Amendment made Negroes citizens of the United States and citizens of the state in which they reside, and thereby created what? Two classes of citizens, one of the United States and the other of the state. Okay, suddenly, okay, that's clearly stating that there's two entities here, the United States and the other of the state, or states, as it states above. Were you taught that in school at all? Okay, prior to the 14th Amendment, let's look at a case, United States Supreme Court. For it is certain that in the sense in which the word citizen is used in the federal Constitution, citizens of each state and citizen of the United States are convertible terms. They mean the same thing. For citizens of each state are entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. And citizens of the United States are, of course, citizens of all the United States. So notice all the United States, all the states, the 50 states, the union, the grouping, the agreement is the separate from what we've been talking about, as you'll soon see. After the 14th Amendment, and again, this was, let's go back to this one. This was 1859, 1898, when this one here, and this is, you know, after the Civil War. Civil War ended in the mid-60s, 1860s. So this is 1898, when this was still well known. This is 1859 that we read earlier, and now we're going to 1873, which is, you know, a few years after the Civil War. It is quite clear then that there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other and which depend upon different characteristics or circumstances in the individual. What is that? What is that circumstance or characteristic? It's being black and not having a citizenship. Now notice the subtlety of this language and their agenda. Do you see it? Let's look at another case here. One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. What? How can that possibly be? How can you be a citizen of a state and not a citizen of the United States? Because they're two different entities. Another, United States Supreme Court, 1875. We have in our political system a government of the United States and a government of each of the several states. Each one of these governments is distinct from the others, and each has its own citizens. Okay. Hope there's red flags going, guys. I hope you're seeing where this is going and what's happened and how the federal government stole us and put us into the same box with it. Okay, another case. Both before and after the 14th Amendment to the Federal Constitution, this is 1966. Let's see, there's some courts and some people who knew what was going on. But have you heard this? Both before and after the 14th Amendment to the Federal Constitution, it has not been necessary for a person to be a citizen of the United States in order to be a citizen of his state. Well, how can you be a citizen of a state and not be a citizen of the United States unless there are two separate, distinct entities? We've been lied to and deceived on this. Okay, ready for this one? A citizen of the United States is a citizen of the federal government. Okay, how do you like that? Do you want to be a citizen of the federal government, or do you want to be a free citizen of the state? Make the decision. Well, you've already made it, and I guarantee you, you are living and acting under the auspices of the federal government citizenship. That's why you pay income taxes. That's why you're subject to all the federal regulations and all this, because you make yourself subject to it. You've allowed yourself to be made a citizen under its jurisdiction. Beginning to get the picture? Okay, let's capsulize all this and tie it a little bit more into the IRS and how they are exerting authority over the states and state citizens. Citizens of the several states prior to the so-called Civil War, and that's a whole nother subject, had their citizenship from their states, period. It was just common knowledge. Slavery brought in people who had no citizenship, since they were either not born in any state or they had no citizenship because of their parents having no citizenship. Government pretended to want to bring in the slaves to full citizenship as part of the freeing allegedly taking place. And there's a little hint. The Civil War was not about slavery, but was about federal government encroachment over states' rights. You know, a war going down, fighting the South, forcing them back into the Union that they were stating we want to get out of because of what was taking place in the North. Long story. You can get a good book called The Real Lincoln. Look it up. The 14th Amendment. Okay, a typo there. Not lawfully ratified, by the way, took care of the slaves, but it also roped in to this federal jurisdiction all citizens already existing in the states. In other words, the federal government created two citizenships which they foisted on all Americans. Actually, it only created one that was above and beyond the citizenship that most Americans had, and extended their jurisdiction outside the original parameters, their cage, that we read about, the jurisdiction, the 18 enumerated powers, the Washington, D.C., Samoa, Guam, Virgin Islands, the territories. It's broken completely out of those parameters and into the states and into our private lives, and we all bought it hook, line, and sinker. I hope you understand who you are. You're beginning to understand who you are. IRS jurisdiction. The IRS, not to mention all agencies of the federal government, now claim jurisdiction into most every aspect of our lives, including over state governments, and this is criminal. What about the EPA? That's for their jurisdiction. That's for their sandbox. That's for their territories. It is not over the states. And there's no constitutional authority for them to be doing what they're doing. The FBI, CIA, NSA, TSA, all of them are completely outside their authority. Now, having this federal citizenship and continuing to act under it only substantiates their presumption, because anything that is not rebutted stands as fact under the law. Have you rebutted your United States federal citizenship? Are you claiming to be a subject, a slave to the federal government and under its jurisdiction? Yes, you are. Every time you file a 1040. Yes, you are. Every time you file for a driver's license. Yes, you are, in countless ways, because the states, unfortunately, have basically sold themselves as whores under the federal jurisdiction by taking bribes called grants and funding and all this from the federal government, which gives the federal government authority into states' affairs and what states do. You got to understand it. It's simple. It's ABC 1, 2, 3. But once you get through this and get over that learning curve, your life is going to change. Now, if you claim to be a federal citizen, you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Go back over this. And you make yourself subject to their taxation just one more way. Slavery was not only not done away with, it was greatly enhanced and continues to this very day. This is why states' rights and sovereignty is making a rapid comeback. Millions of people are waking up to this fraud and how the federal government has encroached into our lives and bound us with chains that were never intended and are unlawful, unconstitutional, and unconscionable. This is also why local people are creating their own liberty zones where they live, and also creating local county guard groups. Some people call them militias. That's a constitutional term. Don't freak out about it. The government's freaking everybody out by stating militias are some horrible group. Well, under every constitution in the states and the federal constitution, militias are mandatory. It is a lawful requirement. And who is the militia? It's you and me. All of us are part of the militia, citizens militia, to take care of each other and to take care of our state and our borders. People like-minded. That's why it's a county guard is a better name. People like-minded who understand the threat we face, even from those among us who are supporting this slavery. We have to free them. They're in their matrix. They're in their little bubble. And a lot of people don't want to escape it because they can't handle the truth. We must act locally and hold our elected officials accountable to their oath of office and to us, their boss, because we, the people, created the federal government, we created the state governments, we created the local governments. So who do you think is in charge? Who's the boss? Is the created greater than the creator? No, doesn't work that way. All right, here's some research material. I'm not going to read them off, but it's vital, for everyone, who wants to understand this fraud against all Americans, to educate yourself on the basic laws and constitutional issues at hand here. We've been deceived. We've been lied to. We've been defrauded. And because of that, the politicians, Congress, senators, the federal government, the agencies, even police and sheriff's departments and everything have completely run roughshod over our lives and are stealing our sovereignty and stealing our freedoms and stealing our money. And when you go through these various links, just you can pause this, you can go back over it, you can find these PDFs, download it, pass them on to everyone that you can find, and just say, read this, look at it, and find out who you are. Because if we do not do that, we are in serious trouble. We're already in serious trouble, but we have millions of people waking up all across this republic and understanding these things. And that's why state sovereignty movements and freedom and liberty movements and constitutional sheriffs and all of these different things are on the move. You can do searches for those things. 10th Amendment Center, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Officers Association, the Jury Association. Just keep looking. I mean, you're going to be dumbfounded at how dumbed down we've been and how dumbed down our kids are being manipulated in our so-called public indoctrination, government indoctrination's public schools. So, next time, what we're going to do is delve into another aspect that's going to tick you off, but you have to understand what the Federal Reserve is, what the banking industry is, how we have been bilked for trillions of dollars and still are today through our credit cards, mortgages, banks, and any aspect of the fiat money system we use today. Doesn't matter what it is. Every loan, every aspect of the system that we're using, that so-called money, we are being stolen from. And you're going to be totally amazed at how simple it could be to get a loan interest-free based on what the Constitution says. So get ready to be a little more angry. So until then, best to everybody, and just keep teaching other people, and don't just push this off as being conspiracy theorist stuff. This is real, this is absolute, this is law, and this is why we are falling as a republic to this day and taking the rest of the world down with us. So till next time.